My name is Elena, and 3 years ago, I tied the knot with Logan, believing we shared the same vision for our future. We settled into a luxurious apartment at the pinnacle of a towering skyscraper in the bustling city center. The view was mesmerizing, and I cherished the moments spent by the expansive windows each evening, watching the sunset drape the cityscape in golden hues. I held a prominent position as the finance department head at a media production company. My career was rapidly ascending, demanding my commitment to ensure a prosperous future for us both. However, my unwavering focus on work began to strain our home life. "Elena, you're hardly ever home," Logan lamented one night as I entered our home close to 10 p.m. "What's the use of this stunning apartment if you can't enjoy it?" Exhausted, I placed my briefcase down. "Logan, we've gone over this before. My career is crucial, not just for me but for us. It's what supports this lifestyle." Before he could mention his mother's opinions, I swiftly interjected, "I'm not interested in conforming to the role your mother envisions for me." Logan's expression grew somber. "Maybe you should care, she's family," I retorted firmly. "And so am I. You knew my priorities when we married. Career first, then family." That night, as I lay awake, I sensed the growing rift between us, exacerbated by his mother's influence. Yet, I was resolved to persevere. I had come too far to back down now. The next day, my boss, Mr. Arthur, beckoned me into his office with promising news. "Elena, we're merging with a major company from another city, and I want you to lead the new department." My heart leaped at the opportunity. "That's wonderful, Mr. Arthur. I appreciate your confidence in me." He cautioned, "This role will be demanding. Can you commit fully?" Without hesitation, I assured him, "Absolutely, sir. I'm ready for this challenge." Eager to share the good news with Logan, I stopped by our favorite restaurant for a celebratory dinner. I set the table meticulously with our finest china, lit candles, and awaited his arrival. However, his mood was visibly sour. "What's all this?" he queried, scanning the setup with suspicion. My excitement spilled over as I exclaimed, "I'm up for a major promotion. This could mean a new house, global travel, endless possibilities." He cut me off, his tone icy. "And more hours at work? When will us become a priority?" "I am prioritizing us," I insisted. "This is for our future." He scoffed. "What future? You're never here. This apartment is always a mess. I'm fed up with takeout." Without another word, Logan retreated to his office and slammed the door. I sat alone, the meal before me cooling off, the apartment's opulence overshadowed by the chaos. 3 weeks after hiring a housekeeper, I noticed a remarkable transformation. Our home was immaculate. This small adjustment seemed a trivial sacrifice for the sake of my career advancement and, hopefully, a step towards mending our strained relationship. We had started to enjoy the benefits of having a housekeeper, with delicious dinners ready each evening, but this change didn't seem to soften Logan's growing discontent. "Found a way to replace yourself at home, too?" he quipped bitterly as we sat for dinner one night. I kept my voice light, hoping to ease the tension. I thought it would help us both, keeping the apartment tidy and ensuring we have nice meals to come home to. "But that's not the problem, is it, Elena?" Logan interrupted, his voice raised as he slammed his fork down. "What's next?" "Finding someone to replace you in other parts of our life." His words felt like a physical blow. "That's uncalled for," I replied quietly, shocked by his harshness. "Uncalled for? Let's talk about what's uncalled for." Logan stood, his chair scraping back violently. "It's uncalled for to always come back to an empty house. It's uncalled for to have a wife more committed to her job than her family." He left the room abruptly, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a heavy heart. In the following weeks, our home was filled with cold silences and sharp exchanges, making every interaction a minefield. My focus on my work, driven by the ambition for promotion, meant I was barely aware of the deepening rift between us. Deciding to break the cycle, I seized a rare day off as an opportunity for reconciliation. I sent Logan a message, filled with hope, planning a romantic dinner tonight, complete with your favorite dessert. He read it but didn't respond. I interpreted his silence as consent and went ahead with the preparations. I decorated the dining table with candles, selected fine wine, dressed in my best outfit, and waited eagerly for him. My anticipation turned to dismay when Logan walked in, not alone, but with his mother, Addison, in tow. "Oh, Elena, what a surprise," Addison cooed, her tone dripping with feigned sweetness. "Were you expecting company?" I forced a smile. I wanted to surprise Logan with a nice dinner. "I wasn't aware you'd be joining us." "Well, I hope there's enough for 3, Addison said, making herself comfortable at the table set for 2. Logan avoided my gaze, taking a seat silently. I suppressed my frustration and fetched an extra place setting, my plans for a romantic evening dashed. Addison dominated the dinner conversation, throwing in subtle digs. "You know, my friend Sarah just became a grandmother. It's such a blessing to have little ones around," she remarked, eyeing me pointedly. I took a deep gulp of wine, replying curtly, "That sounds wonderful." She continued, "Naturally, you need to be around to raise them. A woman's primary role is towards her family, after all." I tightened my grip on my fork, my temper flaring. "Actually, Addison, a woman's role is whatever she chooses it to be." Her eyes narrowed. "Really? And what about your roles as a wife and potential mother to my grandchildren?" Standing abruptly, my chair screeching back, I reached my breaking point. "I think it's time for you to leave, Addison." "Elena," Logan started, attempting to intervene. But I was resolute. "No, Logan, I can't do this anymore. This is my home." Addison rose to her full height, indignation coloring her features. "Well, I never." "Logan, are you going to allow her to speak to me this way?" After they departed, I poured myself another glass of wine and collapsed onto the couch, the evening's dreams dissolving around me. In my elegant dress, amid the dwindling candlelight and untouched food, I pondered a distressing thought. Was this the start of our unraveling? The following morning brought an empty house. A note on the kitchen counter revealed that Logan had gone to stay with his mother to clear his head. My hands trembled as I crumpled the note, tossing it away, a whirlwind of anger and sorrow swirling within me. Days turned into weeks with Logan away, and upon his return, the distance between us had only grown. We navigated around each other like 4 strangers, exchanging minimal words. I reassured myself that we just needed time to adjust, but deep down, unease gnawed at me. Then, one evening after a grueling day of meetings, I returned home to a startling scene. A floral, cloying scent wafted through the air as I opened the door, and there, in our living room, was Addison, in a bathrobe and slippers, looking unsettlingly at ease. "What's going on here?" I demanded, my eyes darting between Addison and Logan, who sat on the couch with a look of discomfort. Addison's smile was tight, unconvincing. "Oh, Elena, how nice it is that you joined us. We were just discussing dinner plans." "Dinner plans?" My voice climbed in pitch. "And why are you dressed like you live here?" Logan inhaled deeply, his next words hitting me like a ton of bricks. "Mom's going to be staying with us for a while. I'm tired of being alone all the time, and since you're hardly ever here," I was speechless. "You invited your mother to live with us without discussing it with me? If you were ever home, maybe we could have talked about it," Logan retorted sharply. I turned to Addison, who wore a smug look as she observed our confrontation. "This is my home. You can't just move in here." Addison's expression hardened. "Your home? This is my son's home too, and if he wants me here, then here I'll stay." "Get out," I said, my voice low and menacing. Logan stepped in front of me. "If you don't like it, Elena, you can leave." I was aghast. "Excuse me? This is my apartment. I bought it before we were even married." "Now it's our apartment," Logan declared. "And I'm telling you, if you can't accept my mother being here, then you can get out." Stunned into silence, I stared at the man before me. This was not the Logan I married. He was a stranger echoing his mother's sentiments. Addison advanced towards me with a threatening look. "You heard him, dear. If you don't like the new arrangement, there's the door." I instinctively stepped back, my hand reaching for my phone. "If you touch me, I'm calling the police." Addison's face shifted to shock. Then she theatrically clutched her chest, sinking back onto the couch as tears streamed down her face. Oh, how you've hardened her heart. That awful job. To think she'd threaten her own family. Logan rushed to comfort his mother, casting me a venomous glance. Without another word, I turned and walked to the bedroom, locking the door behind me. The next morning, as I lay awake, my phone rang. It was Mr. Arthur, my boss. "I need you on a plane today," he said briskly. "The merger is at a critical point." The call came early at 7 a.m. from Mr. Arthur informing me that my presence was crucial to oversee the financial aspects of our merger. "Of course, Mr. Arthur, I'll be there," I assured him as I glanced around the still silent house, assuming Logan and Addison were asleep. I quickly packed a suitcase, and just as I finished, Logan appeared in the doorway. His expression was icy. "Going somewhere?" he asked. I stood up straight, meeting his cold gaze. "Yes, I have to go on a business trip for the merger. I'll be back soon, and we can talk then, okay?" As I wheeled my suitcase to the door, Addison's eyes followed me from the living room, her smile smug. I paused at the door, turning back to Logan. "I'm leaving now. I'll text you when I land." His response was curt and chilling. "Don't bother coming back." His words felt like a blow, but I managed to hide my pain. Silently, I walked out, the sound of the door closing behind me echoing like a somber gong. The business trip was intense, a whirlwind of meetings, negotiations, and late nights spent poring over financial documents. It was a welcome distraction from the turmoil at home. Each night, I sent Logan a text to let him know I was okay, but each went unanswered. After 9 days, I returned, my heart pounding as the taxi pulled up to my building. Approaching my apartment, something was off. My key didn't fit in the lock. Confused, I knocked. The door swung open, revealing Logan and Addison casually dressed as if nothing was amiss. "Logan," I said, my voice laced with confusion. "Why doesn't my key work?" Logan's laugh was cold, devoid of humor. "Because I changed the locks." I felt as if I'd stepped into a nightmare. "This is insane, Logan. You can't do this. This is my home." His expression was stone cold. "Not anymore. You have a choice to make, Elena. Right here, right now. Your career or your home and marriage." I couldn't believe the transformation in him. This was not the Logan I married, but a stranger, twisted by his mother's toxic influence. "You can't be serious," I whispered, barely able to accept the reality before me. Logan pulled out a stack of papers, divorce papers. "Dead serious. Sign these, and you can go back to your job. Tear them up, and you can come back inside, as a proper wife should." I looked from the papers to Logan, then to Addison. At that moment, the clarity of my future crystallized, a life of resentment, of being controlled, of sacrificing everything I'd worked for. Without a word, I took the papers and signed my name on every dotted line. "There," I said, handing them back to him. "I chose my career because clearly I don't have a husband or a family anymore." Their faces registered shock, almost comical in their disbelief. Before they could respond, I turned on my heel and walked away, my suitcase trailing behind me. As I stood in the elevator, watching the numbers descend, a laugh bubbled up from deep within me. I had been ousted from my own home, and in doing so, I had divorced a man who no longer recognized me as his equal. Within just 10 minutes, I found myself without a home. That evening, as I sat alone in a hotel room, my thoughts were in turmoil, reflecting on the tumultuous events of the day. The following morning, I rose early and made a call to my friend Lena, a lawyer I had known since our college days. "Elena, what's wrong? You never call this early." Lena's voice rang with concern over the phone. I spent the next hour detailing the entire ordeal to her. After I finished, there was a brief silence from her end before she finally spoke, her tone steady and reassuring. "Elena, the apartment you bought, was it before your marriage?" she inquired. "Yes," I replied. "In that case, it's usually regarded as separate property, not marital property. It shouldn't be divided in the divorce." Relief swept through me. Newly energized, I threw myself into my work with renewed vigor, focusing on a major merger at my job. Despite the long hours, which often saw me sleeping on my office couch instead of returning to the hotel, I pressed on. A few days later, Maria, a realtor and another longtime friend, called me. Her voice was laden with worry. "Elena, honey, are you alright? I just saw Logan's posts online. He's saying quite unpleasant things about you." "What kind of things?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. Maria hesitated, then said, "He's labeling you a heartless career woman and is talking about suing for alimony and trying to claim the apartment in the divorce." I laughed bitterly. "Let him try. The apartment is mine, and he knows it." After ending the call with Maria, I sat at my desk, my thoughts racing. Logan was attempting to tarnish my reputation, portraying me as the villain in our saga. I couldn't let him succeed. Picking up the phone, I dialed Mr. Arthur's number. After I outlined the situation to him, he responded with a supportive tone. "Elena," he said, "your personal life won't impact your job here. You're a valued employee. Don't let this situation affect your performance." I thanked him, grateful for his support. Mr. Arthur suggested taking some time off to handle my personal issues, especially since the merger was nearing completion. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate that," I replied. That evening, as I was about to leave the office, I noticed a notification on my phone. Logan had started a live broadcast from what used to be our shared apartment, now clearly mine. Against my better judgment, I watched as he and a film crew discussed extensive renovations. An idea suddenly sparked in my mind, and I called Maria with a mischievous plan. "Maria, it's Elena. How quickly can you sell an apartment?" I asked. Her laughter filled the phone. "For you, Elena, I can work wonders. What's the plan?" As I outlined my thoughts, Maria responded with excited gasps and chuckles. "Oh, this is going to be brilliant," she exclaimed. "I already know a couple who's been searching for just this kind of place. They're very discreet. They assured me the deal could be closed in just 3 weeks, maybe even less." After the call, I reclined in my chair, a playful smile forming as I thought about Logan's misguided confidence. He thought he was in control, but he was about to be surprised. The next 3 weeks flew by in a blur of tireless work. By day, I wrapped up the merger, and by night, I handled the paperwork, coordinated with Maria, and watched Logan's boastful social media updates about his renovation plans. When the pivotal day finally arrived, I donned my best suit and took a moment over my morning coffee, preparing for the events that would unfold. My phone buzzed. A message from Maria popped up. "It's done. Paperwork signed. Money transferred. New owners en route. Good luck." A wave of satisfaction swept over me. It was time. I tried to focus on work at the office, but my thoughts kept wandering to the imminent drama. Around midday, Lena texted me. "The TV crew and Logan's mom are here. He's looking very pleased with himself. The show's starting." For the next hour, I struggled to concentrate, my eyes constantly flicking to my phone. Finally, Lena's text came through rapidly. "You won't believe this. New owners just arrived. Logan's stunned. The crew is freaking out. This is epic." I couldn't contain my laughter, earning puzzled looks from my colleagues. I excused myself and retreated to the bathroom, allowing myself a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. Returning to my desk, I found an email from Lena containing a video link. With trembling hands, I clicked it. The video opened with Logan in the center of what used to be our apartment, now just mine, grandly discussing his plans while his mother hovered smugly in the background. Suddenly, a commotion off-camera drew everyone's attention. The camera swung to capture a well-dressed couple entering, followed by Maria holding documents. "Excuse me," the man said politely yet assertively, "but I believe you're in our apartment." Logan's face morphed from confusion to annoyance. "Your apartment? This is my home," he blustered. Maria stepped forward, her professional demeanor intact. "Actually, Mr. Anderson, this apartment now legally belongs to my clients. The sale was finalized this morning." The camera captured Logan's shock as he processed the reality, from confusion to disbelief, then to anger. "Sale? What sale? Elena couldn't have sold this apartment without my permission." "Actually," Maria replied, her smile unwavering. She could, and she did. The apartment was in her name, purchased before your marriage. She had every right to sell it. The scene dissolved into chaos. Logan yelling, his mother dramatically wailing, and the TV crew debating the use of the footage. The video ended with Logan and his mother being escorted out by security, the TV crew eagerly following, sensing they had stumbled upon a spectacular show. Back at my desk, my phone buzzed with another message, my office now, from Mr. Arthur. As I entered his office, bracing for the worst, I was surprised to find him smiling. "Elena, sit down," he said, gesturing to a chair. "I've seen the video. It's all over social media." My face flushed with embarrassment, unsure of what was to come. "Sir, I apologize for the unintended publicity this situation has caused," I said, feeling mortified that my personal life had spilled over into public view. To my surprise, Mr. Arthur chuckled in response. "Elena, you've just demonstrated exactly why you're the ideal candidate to lead our new department. You're clever and resourceful, and you've shown you can turn a difficult situation to your advantage, precisely what we need for this merger." His words brought a smile to my face. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate your support. Now," he continued, his voice taking on a more serious note, "I think it's time you took that week off we discussed. Settle your matters, find yourself a new place, and when you return, we'll finalize your promotion and start you in your new role." During the following week, I dedicated myself to finding a new home, eager for a fresh beginning somewhere that held no memories of Logan or our dissolved marriage. With the proceeds from the sale of the old apartment, I had a broad array of options. In my search, I discovered an ideal little house on the city's outskirts, near our newly merged company's headquarters. It was charming, with a beautiful garden and a picturesque mountain view, a serene escape from past turmoil. I made an offer immediately, and it was quickly accepted. The day I moved in, Lena and Maria came over to help. We unpacked boxes and arranged furniture, filling the house with laughter and light-hearted chatter, letting the stress of recent weeks dissolve as evening fell. Standing in the garden with a glass of wine, I felt a profound peace wash over me as I gazed at the mountains. It was a relief to feel grounded again. When I returned to work the next week, ready to embrace my new responsibilities, I sensed the curious gazes and heard the whispers as I walked through the office. I kept my head high, determined not to be shaken. Mr. Arthur welcomed me at my new office, a prime corner spot with a splendid city view. "Ready to get started?" he asked, smiling. "More than ready, sir," I responded, feeling a surge of excitement. Settling into my new role, I immersed myself in the complexities of the merger, reveling in the challenges that required long hours and deep concentration. I loved every moment, realizing this was what I had worked and sacrificed so much for. One evening, while working late, my phone buzzed with a notification, a message from Logan, pleading for a reconciliation. I paused, considering the message, then deleted it without a reply. That chapter of my life was definitively closed. Now I was writing a new story, one where I held the pen.
"This house is for me and my mother to live in after all. You should get a divorce and leave," Caleb insisted. When the new single-family house was completed, my husband Caleb sneered at me, his words laced with disdain and indifference. My heart sank as I heard his voice, each syllable dripping with coldness and malice, as if it were the most natural thing in the world for him to say. Nearby, my mother-in-law watched with a smirk, echoing his contempt, with a look that twisted the knife further into my chest. They were united in their cruelty. I won't forgive them. A fierce determination ignited in me, burning away any remaining trace of shock. My resolve hardened as I vowed to make them pay, to make them experience their own personal hell on earth. I forced a smile, masking the fury swirling inside me. With a cool, detached tone, I replied casually, signed the divorce papers without hesitation, and immediately contacted someone who could help me. My name is Everly Robinson, a 35-year-old plastic surgeon, and right now, in front of me, my once arrogant husband, Caleb Smith, is kneeling and begging for forgiveness. His desperate whimpers, his tear-streaked face. It's both pathetic and deeply satisfying. His pitiful display would be amusing if it weren't so tragic. How did we end up here? To explain how everything unraveled. Caleb and I were newlyweds, married for just a year. However, if you consider the 3 years we dated before that, we had been together long enough to think that this marriage made sense. We were both in our 30s, ready to settle down and start a life together. But then, something unexpected happened that changed everything. My mother had an accident that left her with a severe lower body injury. She was living alone, and with my father having passed away, there was no one to take care of her. I knew that suggesting she move in with us would be a burden for Caleb, especially so soon after our marriage. But I had no other option. I suggested we build a new, accessible home and live together with my mother. I braced myself for his reaction, fully expecting him to be upset. I wouldn't have been surprised if he had even suggested a divorce right then and there. After all, it's a difficult ask for any newlywed, even with a solid relationship. And Caleb had no real connection to my mother, so I thought he would be reluctant at best. To my surprise, however, he didn't hesitate. He accepted the idea without so much as a grimace. Marriage means joining each other's families, right? Taking care of family is a child's duty. It's only natural, Caleb said, beaming as if he had just proposed something wonderful. His optimism and easy acceptance floored me. I had expected him to put up some resistance, to express at least a bit of discomfort, but there was none of that. He smiled through it all as if the thought of living with my mother didn't bother him at all. I was momentarily speechless. Caleb noticed my stunned reaction and tilted his head slightly. "What's wrong?" he asked, a trace of confusion in his voice. His sincerity seemed almost unsettling. I quickly thanked him, grateful that he had agreed to something that was no doubt difficult for him. When I relayed his response to my mother, she too expressed her gratitude. Things moved quickly after that. We started looking into homes, and in the meantime, my mother made arrangements to move into a temporary care facility. Whether we were renting or building a house, we needed to ensure she had care in the interim. Thanks to some connections I had, the whole process went smoothly, and my mother transitioned into the facility without any problems. Then came the moment to discuss the house, and that's when things began to feel off. We were in the middle of reviewing plans when the subject of how the property should be registered came up. It seemed natural to me that we would put both our names on it. After all, we were married, and this was our home. But Caleb chuckled, a low, dismissive sound, and declined. "You see, I don't earn much, and if the ownership isn't proportional to what I contribute, it might be considered a gift. We'd have to pay taxes on that, and I don't want to burden us with unnecessary expenses. Besides, I'm fine with just Everlay's name on it," he said smoothly, his words wrapped in a veneer of reasonableness. His reasoning was sound, but something about the way he said it unsettled me. Caleb worked as a subcontractor in a manufacturing job. It was hard, underpaid work that took a toll on his body, but he always refused to consider looking for another job. I had suggested numerous alternatives over the years, showing him listings that promised better pay and better conditions, but he refused to even entertain the idea. He insisted that he loved his work and wasn't willing to give it up, no matter how harsh the conditions were. I thought having his name on the house would offer us both some peace of mind. In the event something happened to me, he would have security, but he dismissed that too. "I'll manage," he had said with a shrug. "I don't need my name on the house." It was then, in that moment, that I started to feel something was very wrong. Something I had missed, or perhaps chosen not to see, was beginning to emerge. It wasn't his refusal to put his name on the property, not entirely. It was the casual indifference, the sense that he wasn't as invested as I had thought. And from that point on, the pieces began to fall into place. Usually he would, albeit reluctantly, consider my opinions and agree, saying, "I'm sorry if that's what you want." His tone was always resigned, but today was different. Today, he wouldn't budge on the matter of the property's name. He was adamant, almost desperate, for it to be in his name only. Something was off. I could feel it in the way he tensed up. There had to be another reason for his stubbornness. For the first time since we got married, I felt compelled to question him as if I were interrogating him. I crossed my arms, my voice sharp with frustration. Caleb, let's stop this pointless argument. Do you really think you can keep hiding it like this? I suggested. Huh? His reaction was immediate. Exactly what I suspected. Beads of sweat glistened on his forehead, far more than usual, and his eyes darted around, betraying his unease. Caleb was terrible at lying, and the way he fidgeted confirmed that my probing had hit a nerve. This was why he rarely tried to lie to me. He knew I'd see through him. You thought I hadn't figured it out? I pressed on, my voice softer but loaded with accusation. Caleb sighed, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of the secret he had been carrying was finally too much. Well, Everly, you've got it all figured out, haven't you? His voice was tinged with defeat as he finally opened up. When I was younger, I got addicted to gambling, and my parents didn't have much. I couldn't pay off my debts, and bankruptcy seemed like the only way out. That's why I can't take out a loan. I ended up on the financial institution's blacklist. I've kept it from you because I was scared you'd leave me. I'm sorry. I should have told you before we got married, my husband confessed. His words hit me hard, but something didn't sit right. Wait, I interrupted, my mind racing. You couldn't pay off your debt, so you filed for bankruptcy? Is that what you're saying? I added. Caleb's eyes widened in surprise, unsure of where I was going with this. He stared at me, blinking as if trying to gauge my next move. You know everything, don't you? He asked. I nodded slowly, my expression steady. I figured it out because your behavior was so strange, but more importantly, why didn't you tell me you filed for bankruptcy before we got married? I kept trying to get through to him. His face drained of color. Realizing he had fallen into my trap, Caleb's panic was palpable. He dropped to his knees, grabbing onto me as though I might disappear at any second, his voice trembling. Everly, please, don't leave me. I was just scared. I thought you'd leave me if you knew. I couldn't bear it, he begged. For the first time in our relationship, I saw real fear in his eyes. Fear of losing me. I could feel the sincerity in his voice, and even though part of me was furious, I couldn't bring myself to completely reject him. His agreement to live with my parents made sense now, driven by guilt and a need for atonement. Despite the shock of his confession, I realized that Caleb had been trying to make up for his past in his own way. Living with my parents, something most would find uncomfortable, was his way of making amends. It took time, but I eventually accepted his past and forgave him for keeping such a massive secret. I didn't make it easy for him, of course, and there were plenty of complaints along the way. But in the end, I chose to believe him when he swore there was nothing else he was hiding. I never went through with the divorce. Looking back, though, I didn't realize that my decision would end up being a mistake. I decided to have the property solely in my name, with my mother as the guarantor. It seemed like the safest option at the time. My mother had been urging us to divorce after hearing about Caleb's situation, but when I told her about his willingness to live together, she was left speechless. If that makes you happy, I have no right to interfere, she remarked. Perhaps she thought she shouldn't interfere too much since we would be living under her care. Everyone was looking forward to the completion of the newly built house where my mother and I would live together. After all, despite everything, it was the first time I would be living with Caleb after our marriage. There was no way not to be excited. However, what awaited us in reality was not the sweet newlywed life, but Caleb's terrifying plan. One holiday, my mother-in-law invited us, and it was going to be a dinner with her. Since Caleb had mentioned wanting to discuss the new house with her, we decided to have dinner together, just the three of us. You've been through a lot, dear. I'm sorry I couldn't do anything during that time, she said. My mother-in-law is a very refined person who has always treated me like her own daughter. It's unclear whether she knew about Caleb's bankruptcy, but I didn't want to discuss it and potentially strain their parent-child relationship. During this dinner, I explained that I had savings and wanted to allocate Caleb's money for living expenses, which is why we decided to build the house solely in my name. I'm sorry for always burdening you, Everly, with my low income. At least let me take care of the meals here. As a mother, I may not have much income either, so I can't do much, but you can always rely on me. my mother-in-law suggested. I had always been grateful for the warmth of my kind-hearted mother-in-law, who looked at me so gently as she spoke. We had a pleasant dinner, and when I got up from the table to use the restroom, it happened. After I finished and returned to the room, I could hear the serious conversation between the two of them. "It went well, Caleb. Once that house is completed, it won't be long before we, mother and son, can live together," Caleb's mother said. "I was worried about what would happen if my bankruptcy was exposed, but she's so naive that it was a breeze. As far as I'm concerned, once I overcome the loan and the property name issue, she's completely taken care of," my husband replied. "A son is a valuable possession after all," his mother continued, smiling. "I wanted a barrier-free house too, so it's perfect. It's like a dream to be able to live in a new house," she added. Upon hearing the content of their conversation, my thoughts came to a halt. I couldn't even comprehend what the two of them were saying. It was beyond my understanding. Honestly, that old hag isn't my type at all. I used her because she had money, and she fell for me, so I've been taking advantage of her. Lately, there's this young and cute girl at work who's been hitting on me. I've been thinking about switching to her once the house is built," Caleb continued. Unbelievable words reached my ears, and I was frozen in place. From the beginning, Caleb had only been after my money and the house, and he never cared about me in the slightest. In fact, he intended to use me conveniently and discard me once he was done. But that poor girl too. If she finds out Caleb married her for money, she might faint in shock. The moment I realized that my mother-in-law was also complicit in this, all the gratitude I had felt towards her vanished in an instant, replaced by hatred welling up inside me. Unforgivable. To think that they only saw me as a source of money. I couldn't forgive their intention to use me like that. Fueled by anger reaching its peak, I discreetly made a call on my phone, determined to seek revenge against Caleb and them. I would show them hell. I would make them experience a living hell. Concealing my feelings of hatred, I spent the rest of the day with them as if nothing had happened. Finally, it was the long-awaited unveiling of our new single-family home. Both Caleb and I looked up at our completed house, wearing satisfied smiles. Caleb believed he could take over this house, while I believed I could finally show him hell. We both smiled for entirely different reasons, and he remained oblivious to the true nature of my smile. What a foolish pair they were. If only they hadn't thought about such things, we could have avoided this situation. While thinking about this, I couldn't help but pity Caleb and his mother. Of course, my mother-in-law was also present, putting on a fake performance, and I eagerly awaited the words they would say to me. "Now that we have this impressive house, Everly, there's something important I want to discuss," my husband began. As the three of us explored the new house, Caleb appeared excited and brought up that conversation. I didn't show my anticipation, but I turned toward him with a poker face, as if saying, "I've been waiting." "What's going on? Important talk, you say?" I must have had a bewildered expression on my face as I stared at him, wondering what was going on. At that moment, Caleb and my mother-in-law both wore wicked smiles as they hit me with those words. "This house is meant for me and my mother after all." "You should get a divorce and leave," Caleb uttered, smirking. They likely anticipated my surprise and panic. However, in the next moment, I beamed at them and handed over the divorce papers. "Sure, then please sign this. Afterward, I'll submit it to City Hall," I responded. To my unexpectedly calm response, both of them showed expressions of shock and confusion, clearly taken aback. "Why are you so composed? And why a divorce form?" Caleb was perplexed. "Oh, you didn't know? It's common sense to prepare a divorce form when you get married. I saw it on TV the other day. I carry one with me just in case something happens. Turns out it was a good idea to have it ready. I didn't expect to need it so soon. Glad I studied up on it from TV, right?" With a playful tone, I handed them the divorce papers, which already had my signature on them. They might have found it suspicious, but for both of them, me agreeing to the divorce was quite convenient. Without any suspicion, they signed the divorce papers I provided and handed them back to me with smug expressions. "So with this, the deal is done, right? Thanks for everything up until now. Don't ever get involved with me again," I uttered. With a beaming smile and a cheerful farewell, It was as if Caleb was the one delivering the lines as he responded, "Don't regret leaving the house." Little did they know that those words would come back to haunt them. 3 days later, in the early morning hours, my phone received a barrage of calls from an unknown number. As I happened to have a day off and was trying to enjoy a peaceful sleep, these calls were extremely annoying. Irritated, I picked up the call only to be met with Caleb's shouting echoing in my ears. "Everleigh, what the hell have you done? Explain the situation." His tone was harsh and unlike anything I had ever heard from him, fueling my growing sense of disgust. "You're being quite noisy this early in the morning. I have no idea what you're talking about, and I distinctly recall telling you not to have anything to do with me ever again," I retorted. "Your feelings don't matter. Explain the situation. The bank keeps calling and won't stop," Caleb demanded, his voice brimming with frustration. "Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? I reported the divorce to both the bank and the real estate company," I replied casually. I got up, scratching my head in response to Caleb's voice echoing in my head, and headed to the kitchen for a cup of coffee. My mother, who had already awakened, was seated at the dining table in her wheelchair, pouring a warm cup of coffee for me. "So why am I getting these calls at my end then?" my ex-husband asked angrily. "Of course, the bank is probably about your car, and the real estate company is selling that house, so they're definitely calling to urge you to leave, aren't they?" I concluded. "Hey, didn't you still owe payments on that car?" he asked. Upon hearing my story, Caleb was visibly shocked, and his voice trembled with surprise. Seeing his reaction, I almost spilled my coffee in surprise, as I found his response even more favorable than I had imagined. "Of course. Why should I, the one who got divorced, have to pay for your new car even after the divorce? I bought that car on the day we had dinner with my mom, and I had already made the payments before the divorce," I answered. It's not surprising that Caleb was upset. In fact, when it came to living with my mother, Caleb had requested a car to assist with her care. During our discussions about choosing a home, he mentioned finding a good job about a 15-minute drive from the new house. He wanted to commute there by car and, as a result, proposed that I purchase a car for him. "It's a car we'll use for your mom's care as well, so buying a new one would be more reliable than a used car, don't you think?" he reasoned. Caleb had been discussing this with me, mentioning the purchase of a car worth nearly $140,000. Considering that we might have to transport my mother, having a new car does indeed provide a sense of security, compared to using someone else's. Initially, I had no suspicions and went along with the idea. However, on the day of that dinner, they were loudly discussing this matter and revealing their reasons. "It's a car that can be used for caregiving, so how about selling it as a used car for a decent price?" Caleb suggested. "We can split the cost between me and you. I can use it to buy gifts for the girl at my workplace, and you can get myself a branded handbag. I can trick her into buying that car for sure," he was reasoning with his mother. Unaware that I was listening outside the room, Caleb and his mother were laughing loudly as they discussed their plans. Being a frugal person from a young age, I had saved up over $70,000 and could easily fulfill Caleb's request. However, who would agree to such a scheme after hearing this kind of conversation? Here I decided to take action to strike back. First, I agreed to Caleb's new car purchase and even went with him to the car dealership. We made the purchase agreement with me being responsible for the payments, and we signed the contract 2 months before the completion of the new house. After that, I left his bank account with no deposits whatsoever. Since we had a deal with a shop that allowed buying without a down payment, the bank started hounding Caleb when no withdrawals were made, even after waiting for a month. Caleb, who was completely oblivious and had left everything to me, must have panicked for sure. He hadn't even bothered to check his bank book properly and had left it alone, expecting me to handle everything. His carelessness ended up becoming a noose around his neck. Upon realizing this fact, Caleb was probably as white as a sheet, with all the blood drained from his face and his thoughts completely stopped, unable to come up with any retort. Caleb seemed to be at a loss for words. All that could be heard were sounds like and ah, emanating from him in a pitiful manner. "Oh, by the way, that house has already been sold, and we've found a buyer, so you'll need to vacate within a week, or you'll be forcibly evicted," I added with a tone that was both cold and final. Huh? Caleb's startled exclamation pierced the air as he snapped back to reality, the shock evident in his voice. It's only natural, I continued, my voice laced with icy reasoning. Why would you think someone can just keep squatting in a house that's in my name forever? Neither my mother nor I are living there. It's an unnecessary house, so selling it is a given. Fortunately, the real estate agency is run by an acquaintance of mine, the owner. They were happy to help find a buyer, and it seemed they found one quickly. The contract is already signed and the money has been transferred, so I suggest you move out of that house promptly. If you don't, it might lead to a police report for trespassing. Are you okay with that? I dumbfounded him. Perhaps he realized that I had the upper hand, as Caleb looked completely cornered. Even without seeing his face, I could tell his expression from his tone of voice. It was as if he were saying he had been thoroughly trapped. Too bad, isn't it? I continued, my words dripping with satisfaction. Your plan to take over the new house has failed miserably. I'm feeling really good about getting more than enough in return compared to the alimony from the divorce. Both you and your mother turned out to be even more despicable than I could have imagined, and I seriously regret my judgment of character. Caleb's retort was venomous, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. Well, what makes you think you can get away with something like this, making such a high-handed move without family consent? Are you even human anymore? He shouted. A person like you, trying to take advantage of others and enjoy the benefits, then acting like a victim. You're nothing but scum, I replied angrily. Hearing Caleb's words, my anger ignited, flaring up with a fiery intensity. I delivered the cruel truth without hesitation. The wounds my mother and I carry in our hearts are nothing compared to what you've done. I'll make sure you learn firsthand what happens when you toy with people's emotions, I added. Just as I delivered my words, the doorbell of his house chimed with perfect timing. He remained on the call while answering the intercom. Clearly annoyed by the interruption, Caleb went to attend to the visitor. However, upon seeing the person on the intercom, Caleb let out a small scream. Grandpa! Why is Grandpa here? There on the intercom was my mother-in-law's father, and it seemed like my grandfather-in-law had a stern expression as Caleb and my mother-in-law's voices were filled with fear. I know you're in there. Open this door. The voice of my grandfather-in-law was low, tinged with anger. My mother-in-law responded with fear in her voice. Why are you here, Dad? You shouldn't know about this house. Just open the door. I've heard everything from Everly. I received a call from Everly 3 days ago. She told me everything, from the reason for the divorce to how it all unfolded, he responded. After submitting the divorce papers to City Hall, I reached out to a relative of my two adversaries, my grandfather-in-law in particular. He was a strict individual who had no tolerance for those who strayed from the path of righteousness. He had disowned my mother-in-law as well for her wayward life after her divorce from my father-in-law. However, since my husband Caleb was his grandson and had committed no wrongdoing, we had paid a visit to my grandfather-in-law when we got married. I never would have imagined that my own daughter and grandson would be involved in such a disgraceful matter. Perhaps it was a mistake for me to disown that lad. Everly, I'm truly sorry, he answered during my call to him from the restaurant. Grandfather-in-law was the chairman of a major car manufacturer and a well-known influential figure in the area. In the past, he had undergone surgery at our plastic surgery clinic for a burn accident, so we were somewhat familiar with each other. When I told my grandfather-in-law about this situation, he became visibly angry and headed straight to where my mother-in-law and Caleb were. I'll take responsibility for handling this situation with these two. Everly, you and your mother have been greatly inconvenienced by all of this. Have you found a place to live yet? As an apology for this, would you let me cover the expenses? Tell me where you'd like to live, and I'll purchase it as a gift. Of course, for my foolish daughter and grandson, I'll make sure they earn and transfer the apology fee to you. I don't expect you to forgive us with just an apology, but I hope to make things right for all of you in your own way. I'll ensure they follow through with it, he promised me. For my mother-in-law and Caleb, it was truly a living hell. There was no escaping their grandfather right in front of them. and they found themselves in a situation where his strict management of their lives was a better option than being disowned. And so, with the arrival of my grandfather-in-law, this chapter of the story came to a close. We took advantage of his offer, and my mother and I decided to build a new barrier-free single-family home in my mother's hometown. With the proceeds from the sale of the previous new house, we were able to fully pay off the expenses, and my mother and I embarked on a new life together, just the two of us. Since then, Caleb and his mother were made to work tirelessly under my grandfather-in-law's supervision, from morning till night. Caleb, as part of his punishment, started a job with a contract that cut his salary by 60% for a year. They lived in rundown company housing, and my mother-in-law was subjected to the same treatment as per my grandfather-in-law's declaration. Caleb and his mother sent monthly settlement payments to me as agreed, and it seemed that they had learned their lesson after experiencing such a harsh ordeal. And so, my mother and I were able to regain a peaceful life. She enjoys her daily life while using daycare services. As for me, I continue to enjoy my work and love life, always by my mother's side, sharing laughter and happiness together. Get ready, because I'm about to take you through the roller coaster of experiences I've been navigating. My name is Cassie, and the past few years have not been a walk in the park for me. It all started when I married Brian, the man I thought was the love of my life. Little did I know that his family would turn out to be a nightmare I never anticipated. At first, Barbara, my mother-in-law, seemed like a sweet lady, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Behind that fake smile lurked a dark side that could rival the intensity of any heavy metal song. And Clarence, my father-in-law, your classic creepy old man. His constant side-eye and inappropriate comments made me feel like I was living in a twisted episode of a reality show gone wrong. The breaking point came shortly after marrying Brian, when Clarence, fueled by liquid courage and a twisted sense of entitlement, made a disgusting and inappropriate advance toward me. I confided in Brian and Barbara, expecting their support, but they didn't have my back. Instead, they gaslit me, brushed it off, and labeled me as some attention-seeking drama queen. The audacity, right? For anyone who's been in my shoes, it's painfully hurtful not to be believed, and it's even worse when it's your own family. Some may wonder, why didn't I leave? Honestly, I've been grappling with that question myself. Unfortunately, I stayed, and that turned out to be a colossal mistake. From that moment on, the trust between Brian and me shattered into 1,000 pieces. We argued endlessly, each disagreement pushing us closer to the brink of divorce. It was disheartening to realize that my husband wouldn't stand up for me or believe the truth I was desperately trying to convey. Though the arguing lessened over the years, the underlying tension in our household persisted. We never officially addressed the issues, and because of what I disclosed that day, Barbara and Brian made sure I was excluded from many family gatherings and events. Meanwhile, Clarence got away with everything while I became the outcast. My sadness turned into purebred anger. I began plotting my revenge. Retribution is most satisfying when served with a calculated coolness. I wasn't about to let these people dismantle my spirit. Divorce seemed to be the sole escape route, but let's face it, I was a simple housewife, lacking prestigious degrees or a substantial bank balance. Walking away from Brian would mean departing with nearly nothing. I aspired for more than just alimony. I refused to let those cunning manipulators triumph with a mere divorce. My mind raced as I contemplated a strategy to retaliate, to demonstrate that I was not a helpless damsel awaiting rescue. I aimed to reveal the authenticity of my plight. However, each idea that crossed my mind seemed too ordinary, too predictable. I yearned for something grand, something that would make them rue the day they doubted and discarded me. I started with Brian's phone. Aware of his penchant for safeguarding information in that little device, I seized the opportunity one night while he slumbered like a hibernating bear. With finesse, I placed his fingerprint on the phone sensor, unlocking it seamlessly. And in an instant, I gained access to a treasure trove of information. I delved into his texts, emails, and digital footprints, scouring for any evidence that could serve as my ticket to vengeance. And lo and behold, nestled amidst mundane daily exchanges were conversations between Brian and my mother-in-law. The contents sent shivers down my spine. They were scheming to move Barbara and Clarence into our home. Can you believe it? The reason? They wished to be closer to Brian and me, mending a relationship long fractured. But I knew better. It was Clarence who initiated the idea, that slimy individual. He believed enough time had passed and no one would believe me again if he tried anything. Realizing the potential advantage in the situation, I chose not to reveal that I had gained the upper hand. I kept this information to myself and began plotting my next move. Several months passed, and things were progressing rapidly. I routinely checked Brian's phone, staying updated on the plans for Barbara and Clarence to move in. The approaching days, revealed through the texts, also unveiled Brian's intention to spring this news on me. The audacity! Nevertheless, it didn't matter because I had devised a plan. The next day when I got home from work, I adorned myself in something elegant, dimmed the lights, lit candles, played some smooth jazz, and welcomed Brian home. He was taken aback by the tranquil and inviting atmosphere since we typically did our own thing upon his arrival. "Hey babe, welcome home. I've been planning a little surprise for you. Come in, take a load off, and soak up this cozy atmosphere," I said, trying to keep the excitement out of my voice. "Wow, babe, what's all this?" Brian asked, clearly surprised. "I'm scared," he added. "Scared of what, babe? I'm doing something nice for you," I replied, keeping my voice light. "Well, I guess I'm just surprised is all," he said. "Babe, don't be like that. I did all of this for you," I told him, pretending to pout. Okay, you're right. I'm sorry. Wow, you've outdone yourself, baby. It feels like I just stepped into a romantic movie scene," Brian had said, his guard lowering. "Well, you've been working your butt off, and I wanted to spoil you a bit. You deserve it, my hard-working man," I continued, my voice smooth and comforting. "Oh, thanks, babe. You always know how to make me feel special." "So, what's the treat? I'm all ears," Brian had responded, clearly touched. "I'm going to give you the most relaxing foot massage ever. I've got some special oils lined up to work their magic on those tired feet of yours," I said, my tone silky and soothing. "You know me so well, baby. Your foot massage sounds heavenly right now," Brian had uttered, utterly relaxed. "Of course, my dear. Let me work my magic and make you feel like a king. Just sit back, relax, and enjoy the royal treatment," I continued, inwardly reveling in my success. He complied with the treatment, feeling princely and regal as he sat down. I knew the time had come to initiate my attack. I began washing his feet, intentionally massaging them slowly and soothingly, eliciting appreciative groans from him. "You know, Brian," I began, "I've always admired your confidence and intelligence. Sometimes I feel like I can't keep up with all those smart people things," I kept praising him. "Oh, come on, Cassie," Brian replied. "You're plenty smart. Don't sell yourself short." "But I mean, I didn't even finish college," I said, trying to mask the frustration in my voice. "Exactly," he responded casually. "Sometimes I feel like I'm no good at anything," I added. "That's okay, baby. You've got me to lean on," my husband, his voice softening. "Yes, babe," I uttered, smiling at him. "You're so reliable, kind, and smart. I consider yourself quite intelligent, don't I? You're taking such great care of me, my clever love. I'm truly grateful to be married to such a smart, strong, and handsome man. You always take care of me, babe," I added. "Just doing my job and you excel at it," Brian boasted. "I swear no one else could do what you do. I've been attempting to sign a document for a while now, and I'm a bit confused. Can you help me?" I asked, sweetening my voice. While he basked in the glory I showered upon him, my request seemed like the icing on the cake to him. He was so confident. "Sure, babe. Anything you need," Brian replied, puffing up his chest. "I don't mind lending my expertise to anyone who needs it. So, next to you, there's a document," I continued. "And there are so many lines for me to sign," I said innocently. "So, what's the problem?" Brian inquired. "Well, because I haven't written in a long time, my handwriting is awful," I admitted. "I'm scared I'm going to mess up the paper." "Don't be silly, Cassie," he uttered, looking up at me with a smile. "All signatures look a bit messy, but I like your signature. It exudes class and elegance. People will take you seriously when they see your lovely signature." It looks very well educated, I remarked. Does it? He asked, a little surprised. Uh-huh. Please sign it for me, baby, I urged him. All right, I'll sign it for you, he said, finally relenting. Great, I said, handing him the pen. Just sign on all the dotted lines, please, I asked him. Yeah, I know how it works, babe. I'm the one who went to college, remember? Brian responded with a hint of arrogance. I swallowed my pride because I was about to throw dirty water in his face. However, I was on a mission, anxious and depending on his relaxed state. I hoped he would casually sign it without reading it. If he started reading it, I'd be in trouble. Luckily, my prediction came true. With an air of boasting, he casually and lazily signed the document, sealing his fate. I strategically positioned Brian exactly where I desired, completely at ease and under my influence, oblivious to the impending revelation. He peacefully slipped into dreamland, accompanied by the echoes of his snores. This was my cue to delve once more into the depths of his phone. To my satisfaction, I stumbled upon a significant revelation, a conversation between Brian and his father, Clarence, the catalyst for the forthcoming upheaval. In the dialogue, Clarence eagerly offered to fix the rift between Brian and me. The audacity of his words left me incredulous. The text read, Hey Brian, I've been missing Cassie so much. I want to fix things between us. Can't wait to move in. Yeah, Dad, Brian replied. I'm sure she'll be excited once I announce the news. But you guys were meant to move in earlier. How long until you come to this side? Clarence's response revealed their deliberate delay, citing house extermination and fumigation as the reason for the postponement. A surge of repulsion, ire, and betrayal overwhelmed me. Clarence's sinister motives were laid bare, and Brian remained blissfully ignorant. It appeared that everyone had conspired to withhold information from me, preparing to blindside me. Undeterred, I formulated my game plan, fueled by a sly grin as I secured those crucial signed documents in a discreet location, my golden ticket to retaliation. The evening continued with a facade of affection and indulgence towards Brian. Irony loomed as I pampered him, concealing the brewing storm within. Little did he know, a rude awakening awaited him when my unsuspecting in-laws, Mommy and Daddy Dearest, would make their surprise visit. The anticipation built over a month finally reached its climax as my in-laws were set to arrive. Unfazed, I maintained an Oscar-worthy act of innocence. Brian, blissfully ignorant, was eagerly anticipating the unfolding events. As lunchtime approached, so did the arrival of my in-laws. Following Brian's instruction, I opened the door to find Barbara beaming with delight and Clarence standing behind her, licking his lips with anticipation. A U-Haul parked in the driveway. The moment of revenge had arrived, and the tables were about to turn. Hey there, it's been a while. You both look great, as always. So what brings you two here? I asked as Brian emerged from behind me. The surprise unfolded. His parents wanted to move in with us temporarily. I played my part, expressing surprise and excitement at the appropriate moments. Everyone seemed pleased as we welcomed the couple inside. Once indoors, I unleashed the words I had held back for years. Do you think you can just waltz in here, acting like you own the place? Who said I wanted you here? Silence followed, broken by Clarence's attempt to hush me, but I refused to stay silent any longer. No, Brian, I won't shut up. I've held back for too long. I pointed at Clarence. Remember what you tried to do to me years ago? Tell the truth now. I'm warning you, this is your last chance to come clean, I demanded. Clarence dismissed it as lies, claiming I was delusional. Apologies were offered for my behavior, and I was told to go back to the kitchen where I supposedly belonged. I wasn't having it. We came here to make peace, but you're too stupid and selfish to realize that, Clarence sneered. Brian, when you're paying for this fool to get a degree, maybe she'll learn some sense during her course, he added. You both think you're so smart with your degrees and fancy lives, I shot back, my voice rising. I may not have been raised like you. My English isn't perfect, but I'm talented, business savvy, a hard worker, bilingual, and I look good. Something my husband appreciates, I firmly stated. The tension escalated, and amidst my serious Plan B was mentioned. Turned out, Plan B was to kick me out of the house if I acted out. When I confronted Brian about it, questioning, Is speaking the truth considered acting out now? He simply looked at me, coldly replying, in times of intense emotional ups and downs, like the current mess, I have to stress the importance of taking action. You need to temporarily relocate until you can regain composure and stop exhibiting erratic behavior, he uttered. Incessantly, your actions have reached a level of intensity that demands this intervention, Brian continued, his voice devoid of empathy. If you believe the present situation is unconventional, brace yourself, because the true extent of unpredictability is yet to unfold. Contrary to your expectations, you are the one who will be compelled to vacate the premises permanently, I uttered. The calm in my tone as I delivered this news was chilling. He stared at me in disbelief. What are you talking about, Cassie? His expression remained stern. I've executed the transfer of property ownership through legally binding documents. Remember those papers I asked you to sign a month ago? They weren't just about the usual finances. They were about this house. I am now the legal owner, and that includes all its contents, I smirked. You manipulated me into signing those, Brian shouted, the anger surging through him. I gloated, my voice dripping with condescension. The elaborate contractual conditions I orchestrated necessitated your repeated signatures, ensuring your explicit acknowledgement of the proceedings. Even though you were not fully informed. You were too naive to notice, I added. My explanation of this betrayal to my spouse and in-laws was met with understandable anger. They hurled insults and threats of legal action at me. Brian's mother, Barbara, glared at me, seething. How could you deceive us like this? I met her gaze and shot back. Attempting to pursue legal action against me would prove futile. Brian, were you under duress while signing those documents? I questioned him. Brian didn't even flinch. I didn't sign anything under duress, he replied smoothly. Barbara, refusing to believe me, said, Your claims are baseless. We'll go to the authorities. Do that, I said, unfazed. It would only expose the lack of credibility in your accusations. The evidence is indisputable, with Brian's signatures affirming the legitimacy of the ownership transfer, I concluded. Realization dawned on Barbara's face as she recognized the futility of their threats. My in-laws began to understand the gravity of what had transpired. They expressed regret for their disbelief and sought to involve law enforcement, but it was too late. This house, I said, turning to Brian, stands as retribution for years of disbelief and deliberate attempts to undermine my self-worth. As I proceed with divorcing you, rest assured that the court will be the setting for our resolution. It is time for all of you to vacate my property immediately, I demanded. The shock resonating in the room was palpable. Clarence, Brian's father, was too stunned to speak. Barbara was visibly frustrated, struggling to find the right words to express herself. Despite her desire to speak up, she realized she couldn't say anything. They were all deceived. I've grown tired of enduring your mistreatment, I continued, my voice firm. Your manipulation, your lies. I refuse to remain a victim in your lives. This is over, I said angrily. Shortly after making this decision, news started circulating rapidly. Clarence, that deceitful snake, was caught attempting to engage with an underage girl. The irony was not lost on me when I heard Barbara mutter, Can you believe it? Now he's facing significant time in prison. I never imagined. Thankfully, someone finally brought him to justice, I said, unbothered by his plight. I suppose he finally got the consequences he deserved. Barbara, still reeling from the revelation, looked at me with tear-filled eyes. I don't know what to say, she stuttered. You don't need to say anything, I replied, my tone devoid of sympathy. You averted your gaze for far too long, and your empathy now arrives too little. Too late. And Brian? That conceited fool couldn't even muster the courage to contest the house legally. He was too preoccupied with nursing his wounds and wallowing in embarrassment at being deceived by his less educated wife. Tough luck, Brian, I said, watching him squirm. The victories are all mine, and you're left with nothing but remorse. Life is truly flourishing for me now. I'm reaping the benefits of sweet alimony and luxuriating in the opulence of a beautiful home once tainted by its toxicity. I relish this newfound freedom. It tastes incredibly sweet. The world is my oyster, and I intend to seize it by the pearls. Before conquering the world, however, I have one dream to pursue. I am determined to establish my hair salon as a haven, where beauty intersects with empowerment. It will stand as a testament to my strength and resilience, showcasing how I transcended the chaos from a mere housewife to a formidable entrepreneur. I am the architect of my destiny. I raised a glass to the reflection in the mirror. Here's to the underdogs who triumphed, celebrating the power of resilience and the ability to live life on our terms, I said aloud. And with that, I embark on my next adventure, exploring the world with a soul ablaze and a heart brimming with gratitude. This is my story, and I am the fearless queen who vanquished the demons of a toxic past.